Last year, over 80 ghost guns and ghost gun parts were recovered in Manhattan alone. The NYPD and the Manhattan DA's office have been leading in the interdiction of these ghost guns. And one thing I want to make clear, they're unserialized, they can be printed out, but as this case tragically makes clear, they are just as deadly as traditional firearms.
Murder in the second degree is a crime of terrorism.
Priority for us here.
That's crazy.
Finally, I know there have been questions about the extradition process. The latest that I can offer you is that
41% of young voters find the killing of United CEO acceptable.
In court in Pennsylvania on Thursday morning, first for a preliminary hearing on his Pennsylvania charges. Immediately to follow that will be an extradition hearing. We have indications that the defendant may waive that hearing, in which case he'd be brought to New York forthwith. In any event, we have been preparing on parallel paths, and before the hearing, we'll send to the governor of the state of New York the paperwork that would be necessary if he does not waive during that hearing. I now want to turn over to our great commissioner, and when I do so, I wanted to thank her for her partnership, not only on this matter, but on all we do every day together. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. The unsealing of today's indictment brings us one step closer to securing justice for Brian Thompson and his family and affirming the primacy of the rule of law in the city of New York. NYPD detectives worked tirelessly to piece this case together. And along the way, the Manhattan DA's office made sure we had every legal tool available to us.
Boo.
Whether quickly providing subpoenas to assist with our evidence collection, or traveling with us to Altoona, Pennsylvania last week after the apprehension, our partnership made this a successful investigation. So I'd like to thank District Attorney Bragg and his team for their work in bringing this case forward. Part of that work included the relentless collection and analysis of surveillance video by our detectives, which ultimately produced a clear image of our suspect. That image was shared far and wide through the media, and thanks to an observant McDonald's customer and the employee who alerted the police, Mr. Mangione was quickly brought into custody.
What the fuck?
This outcome is why we always emphasize the critical role of the public in our public safety mission. So again, I want to thank everyone who saw something, said something, and did something. That is why we have a suspect in custody today.
Bro, someone should have told you something not to wear this fucking jacket. God damn, that shit is ugly.
And indicted for murder. And let me be perfectly clear. In the nearly 2 weeks since Mr. Thompson's killing,
if you see something, say something. Girl, that jacket is not it.
Celebration of cold-blooded murder. Social media has erupted with praise for this cowardly attack.
Oh, they're coming after all of us.
People ghoulishly plastered posters threatening the CEOs, other CEOs, with an X over Mr. Thompson's picture, as though he was some sort of a sick trophy. And yesterday, the New York Post reported that some extreme activists were circulating a deck of cards with other most wanted CEOs to be targeted for assassination. These are the threats of a lawless, violent mob who would trade in their own vigilantism for the rule of law that protects us all. Let me say this plainly. There is no heroism in what Mangione did. This was a senseless act of violence. It was a cold and calculated crime that stole a life and put New Yorkers at risk. We don't celebrate murders, and we don't lionize the killing of anyone. And any attempt to rationalize this is vile, reckless, and offensive to our deeply held principles of justice. Now, as we await the extradition process in Pennsylvania to complete, we continue our public safety work here at home. That includes our focus on the growing threat of ghost guns, one of which was used in this attack. The NYPD remains committed to tracking down and removing these untraceable weapons from our streets. And we will do that work hand in hand with District Attorney Bragg here in Manhattan and in every other borough to ensure that those who possess, distribute, and use these weapons are held fully accountable. Finally, I want to again thank every member of the NYPD, uniform and civilian, working on this case, led, of course, by our great Chief Kenny, whether in Midtown North Squad, Homicide, the Crime Scene Unit, Intelligence Bureau, and everywhere else. All of you contributed to today's indictment, and you've brought the Thompson family one step closer to justice in this case. Thank you.
The idea that, like, people say we don't lionize killers and murderers is so funny because, like, America absolutely does that, okay? They absolutely do that. That's crazy. The mainstream press have celebrated and justified the deaths of hundreds of thousands at this point over the course of the past year. When it's dead children in Gaza, it's perfectly valid. Republicans have lionized, literally in this very moment, they're lionizing the likes of Daniel Penny. Openly, in the same breath, they're like, how could someone kill a healthcare CEO and not a unhoused, mentally ill black person? Like, what? You should just kill them. You should kill them instead. What are you talking about? Like, that's it. Of course, every single person is like desensitized to all of this violence. There's a fucking school shooting that happened yesterday. Clipped. Okay. It's crazy. It's crazy that they act like this, as though all of the justification for the endless, unfettered violence is not inevitably going to change the collective psychology of Americans in general. It's going to leave them desensitized to violence.
So the original missing report took place back in November 18th in San Francisco. The sergeant that was involved in that case reached out to the San Francisco field office and said, hey, basically, I'm working on a missing case. I saw the photograph that was distributed by the NYPD. There bears a resemblance. That tip was forwarded to us close to 45 hours after the incident took place. It showed up to a TFO, which is a task force officer. We have NYPD officers embedded with the FBI. They received that tip. It was one of 4 tips that they had received that day, and they were vetting it. Part of that vetting process was that they reached out to Mangione's mother in San Francisco very late on the 7th. They had a conversation where she didn't indicate that it was her son in the photograph, but she said it might be something that she could see him doing. So that information was going to be passed along to the detectives the next morning, but fortunately we apprehended him before we could act on that.
The commissioner has talked about how the defendant's been lionized and celebrated. I'm wondering how concerned you are about.
Yeah, how are we gonna start punishing the people who are upset about healthcare? Can we just kill them too? Can we start arresting people who are upset about their healthcare?
Concerns, which I think were put forth beautifully. I mean, we see a lot in these jobs. I meet with the families of homicide victims, and I just can't wrap my head around the notion that someone is celebrating this. To your specific question, you know, we're at the beginning of a litigation now with our charge. We have a phenomenal trial team in place, led by ADA Joel Seidman, who has been in this office for more than 40 years and handled some very challenging matters. We have a wide-year process in place. I have faith in our jury system to select 12 people who can be fair and impartial, but we'll move forward, and that's something well down the road, but we'll be ready when that time comes.
2 questions, if possible. One will be about Mr. Thompson's family. But first, I want just maybe to explain more to viewers how you come to the conclusion that this is an act of terrorism. I think it's an important part of this. And so I'm hoping maybe you can explain that a little more, just sort of define maybe the statute here.
Sure, and my point, I mean, the statute talks about attempts to influence or coerce a civilian population. The statute talks about intending to influence a policy of government, and it talks about seeking to, put forth things sort of similar to that by murder. So the statute, the plain language of the statute is clear. Obviously, we've charged it. The grand jury has voted on it, and we intend to go forward and prove it. But I think it does help to take a step back, and think about the the proof in the case, some of the writings. I'm not going to get into too much of that, but in the actual reaction. In the middle of Midtown, the beginning of a busy day, tourists, commuters, business people, the intent was to sow terror.
And if I could just
I don't know about all that, man.
Sadly, as you say, not a lot of focus has been given to Mr. Thompson or his family. I'm wondering if the services folks, or any of the folks in your office, have been talking to them of what that's been like. Is anything you can say about that?
I'm not going to talk about communications with the family other than to say that
Yeah, revenge killing of any sort is not considered terror until the revenge killing is conducted against a CEO, a person that is of notoriety and worth in society.
Like you're saying,
Okay.
so much focus on
It's terrorism.
suspect, quite different.
I echo what the commissioner said, and the sentiment of your question, my heart goes out to it. I mean, this is a significant piece of what we do here, is we center the trauma of survivors and victims and their families.
As the
Significant
CEO of
piece
my
what
own
I
small
do is
business
sit
Pokemon card
across the
reselling
table
company, I am
and look people in the
terrified.
eye, and when appropriate, if they want to, offer a hug, and we have.
Your joke, but like I can see that being the next step of universalizing the fear and being like, you don't understand. Who amongst us isn't a CEO in their own way? You know what I mean? Like trying to make it seem as though the fucking mom and pop shop owner in your local neighborhood is a direct target of this kind of terrorism, just as the United Healthcare CEO is. Like, you have to understand, it's the same. It's the same, actually. We're all CEOs. This is a nation of CEOs. We're all CEOs one way or another.
Yes, absolutely. And we've seen a real increase, sustained increase since December 4th in concern, not just from CEOs, but from corporations broadly. And so going back to the DA's point, the intent to intimidate or coerce a civilian population, which is, of course, at the root of our state terrorism statute.
Even if I wasn't convinced by the killing itself, the narratives in response to it would have been pretty fucking radicalizing to me, seeing that the entire governments are jumping into action to protect CEOs when no such protection has ever been afforded to anyone else. Wow. Yeah, but I think you have to remember, the average American, in my opinion, is like fairly servile. So when they see these instruments of justice and all of these institutions like come out and defend the pecking order that exists, like I think they're infinitely more open-minded to that sort of thing, like reinforcing the pre-existing constructs. Like they will be like, oh no, I agree. Actually, you're right. It is kind of fucked up. The my lord attitude. My lord must be protected.
All the work that we do together every day, we're quite confident that concerns and threats are going to be appropriately directed our way.
We're going to take two more. Yep. Dear Bradley, can you describe just how rare it is for your office to charge with first-degree murder? There has been some talk about how rather than certain very specific cases in Manhattan. And also, if you could speak to the statements made on the record by the suspect that inform this timeline in particular, because needed incriminating more statements that happened.
So I'll address the first piece. The first-degree murder statute has a number of subsections. They're sort of clearly delineated, and they are reserved for, the most abhorrent conduct, killing a police officer, serial killing, and the terrorism is one subsection of that. And so I would say, fortunately, that's not happening a lot. Taking a step back, I can't think of another office that is more equipped to handle a terrorism charge. We have a great terrorism unit.
He's like
at the forefront of getting the statute passed. Within the last 2 years, we've tried 2 very significant terrorism cases, one involving an English-speaking operative based in Jamaica, and another involving someone who was here and funding overseas terrorism by cryptocurrency. So We have the expertise, and as I mentioned, the expertise on this team, and so we're prepared to go forward.
Have other statements?
Yeah, I'm not going to go beyond what's in the filing.
All right, last question, Laura. Hey, Greg, are you able to say now, I know it's going to take, but that you will be seeking the maximum sentence?
So as a matter of practice, I don't talk about sentencing outside of court as a first matter, and certainly not at the initial stages of a matter. But I think you can tell the seriousness with which we take this matter by the way in which it's charged. The murder in the second degree actually has a mandatory life without parole sentence, no discretion for the judge at all. So that's the maximum there. But I'm not going to go beyond that. We will first get the defendant to New York.
The audio is shit in these meetings because they have to open up the boom mic so that they can hear the random journalist and then go back to the individual mic. That's why it's bad.
Equipped to do that, and then we will proceed to sentencing, at which point we'll make our arguments in court. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, sir.
I was taking your book.
Someone in the chat brought forward a really interesting point, but yeah, Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg hates Luigi seemingly more than he hates Donald Trump, and his prosecution of Donald Trump got him an endless sea of death threats. That should tell you everything you need to know about those in positions of power under liberal capitalist democracy.